There's just something about the open sea, isn't there? This huge kind of mysterious place where, well, anything can happen, especially when you mix advanced tech with something baffling. Today, we're diving into those mysterious drone encounters back in 2019. You know, the ones buzzing U.S. Navy destroyers off Southern California. We've looked through the articles, the research, your notes, all fascinating stuff. So our mission here is to really unpack this USS Kidd incident, pull out the key bits of info, the insights, and maybe try to figure out what we actually know versus what's still just out there. Okay, let's get into it. It starts apparently on warm summer nights, July 2019. Sailors on the USS Kidd, that's an Arleigh Burke destroyer, top-of-the-line Aegis system, they start seeing what look like, well, consumer drones near the ship.
Right, and you have to understand why that first sighting was immediately such a big deal. First off, it's flat out illegal to fly anything near a Navy ship like that, period. But maybe more importantly, the Kidd was way out there, like 10 times farther from shore than a normal consumer drone could ever reach. And then there's the duration. The object apparently hung around for at least 3 times longer than a typical drone battery lasts. So already you've got questions. Now, think about the location too. Southernmost Channel Islands. That area is incredibly busy. You've got huge commercial ships, pleasure boats from SoCal, fishing boats everywhere. And on top of that, it's one of the busiest patches of ocean on Earth for naval operations. You know, Camp Pendleton, Coronado, Naval Base San Diego, lots of firepower, hundreds of ships based there. So the sheer audacity, choosing that spot to buzz the world's most capable destroyer. You got to wonder, like you said, was it someone incredibly bold or maybe just incredibly foolish, like a serious death wish?
Yeah, the location itself is wild. But what really grabbed me from the records was this wasn't just a one-off thing. Over 4 nights, there might have been several of these things, these superpowered drones maybe. And they weren't just bothering the Kidd. No, they approached maybe 4 other Navy ships. The Rafael Peralta, the Russell, the John Finn, the Paul Hamilton. And get this, even a Carnival cruise ship, the Imagination, radioed the Peralta saying they saw 5-6 drones and confirmed they weren't theirs. That's a lot going on in a sensitive area.
It really is. And you know, it's interesting how this story even got out there in the first place. It mostly kicked off in 2020. A UFO YouTuber, Dave Beatty, he got contacted by a Navy vet who spilled the beans. So Beatty files Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIA requests, and bam, he gets 462 pages of handwritten deck logs from the Kidd. He shared those with other researchers, and a couple of them wrote it up for the drive. That became like the main report everyone saw. It kind of shows how public info requests can really drag these things into the light, you know?
And those logs, they paint quite a picture. They talk about UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, sometimes one, sometimes multiple. They even sent out Snoopy teams, that's sailors with good cameras, trying to snap pictures. And once, Mark 87 teams were involved. That sounds like some kind of electro-optical tracking, maybe for weapons. And again, remember, the Kidd has Aegis, literally the world's best system for tracking and shooting down incoming stuff. But here's the kicker for me. The reports were based on seeing lights. Now, it's easy to turn lights off on a drone, right? So doesn't that make you think whoever was doing this wanted to be seen? What's your take on that?
That's definitely a puzzling aspect. If you want to be stealthy, you kill the lights. So yeah, it suggests visibility was intended. And to get a better handle on the where and when, other researchers jumped in. They used public AIS data, automatic identification system. That's the system ships use to avoid collisions, broadcast their position. Commercial ships have to use it. Navy ships can turn it off, sure, but researchers could still track the ships involved, match it with the deck logs, and build this really detailed timeline of the sightings.
Okay, let's talk tech for a second. A big claim you hear is about the flight times, like 90 minutes on station plus travel time. People say that's way beyond commercial drones.
Well, yeah, but that's where you need to be careful. That's only true if you're talking about the kind of electric drones you buy at Best Buy, you know? Consumer grade stuff, the market's much bigger than that. There are industrial high-endurance drones. Think pipeline inspections, search and rescue, security, these things. They're different beasts. Flight times over 5 hours, ranges over 200 kilometers. That tech has been around. Often they use hybrid power, gas electric, or small rotary engines. And they can carry decent payloads like extra fuel tanks. Now, they're not cheap. You're talking 6 figures, easy, for a fleet. But the point is, you don't need to jump to, like, secret military projects or foreign powers to explain the capabilities reported. Commercially available tech could theoretically do it.
That's a really important clarification. But okay, what about the Navy's own drones? They have things like the MQ-8 Fire Scout that's basically an unmanned helicopter, right? Flies for hours, long range. And the MQ-9 Sea Guardian. And wasn't there an exercise, Unmanned Integrated Battle Problem 21, right in that same area in 2021 with these ships in drone systems.
Mm-hmm.
So given the Navy has its own capable stuff, why is the commercial versus military distinction so key? Couldn't their guys recognize their own drones?
But that's exactly where the FOIA stuff gets critical. According to the Navy's official response and internal emails they released, none of their unmanned vehicles were flying during the Kidd incident. Full stop. So that deepens a mystery, right? If it wasn't off-the-shelf consumer stuff, but maybe high-end commercial, okay. But if it wasn't the Navy's own advanced drones either, then what was it? And think about what didn't come back in the FOIA requests. No photos, no radar data, no Aegis tracks. Now, Aegis data is super classified, so you wouldn't expect to get that anyway. But it also leaves open the possibility maybe no definitive data like that was ever recorded.
Right. The lack of hard sensor data is that's a big gap. Especially with Aegis. Does that just mean the system didn't pick them up for some reason? Or maybe it points to a different kind of failure, like relying too much on just what people saw in the dark.
Exactly. At the end of the day, the only thing we know for absolutely certain is humans saw lights in the sky, and they interpreted those lights as drones. But the why is mostly missing. Why drones? What specifically made them think that? Most reports just say objects off to the side. There was one mention of a single white light above the flight deck, but again, no clear distance or position. Vague. One log did mention a red flashing light. Okay, that's consistent with drones, but also, regular aircraft.
And this gets us to a really fundamental point, something easy to forget. Human perception. If you're standing on the ground or on a ship's deck at night, you simply cannot reliably judge how far away a single point of light is. It's not about training. It's not about good eyesight. It's geometry. It's physics. Unless you have another reference point, triangulation. You can't tell if it's small and close or big and far away.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a trained observer who can beat geometry. We need more data. And here, we basically got none.
And that limitation, it's huge when you look at UFO reports generally. A light in the sky, that's the #1 most common type of report. And precisely because you can't judge the distance, they almost always stay unidentified. They're just uselessly vague, unfortunately. Could it be something extraordinary? Maybe. But it could also just as easily be a plane, a star, a planet, a helicopter, another drone. Misidentified. It opens that door wide open.
Okay, so let's try to pull this together. What are the likely explanations here based on everything? The sources seem to point to 3 main possibilities. 1, it really was high-end drones, industrial or maybe military, operated by someone with deep pockets, maybe from shore, maybe from a boat hiding out there. Motives could be anything from enormous stupidity, like the source said, maybe a prank, or actual intel gathering, probing the Navy's reactions. Could even be the Navy testing its own people, maybe seeing how they react to something that looks like one of their own MQ-8s. Okay, possibility 2, misidentification of things on the surface. Remember, the logs didn't clearly say anything was seen above the horizon, and at night, you can't really see the horizon clearly anyway. Plus, the ships were moving. Maybe they were just seeing lights on other boats or rigs and misjudging them. And possibility 3, misidentification of just normal stuff in the sky. Maybe someone saw one ambiguous light, reported it, and then suddenly everyone's on edge, seeing drones everywhere in that busy airspace. Especially, with all the UFO hype coming from the Navy itself around that time. Maybe that made people jumpier. That seems plausible too.
And we actually have proof that misidentification did happen for at least part of this. There's some great research by Mick West on Metabunk. He looked at a really intense report from the USS Russell on July 15th. The log said at least 8 drones seen to the west-southwest between 9 and 10 p.m. Sounds dramatic. But West checked the ship's position. It was directly under the flight path for planes approaching Southern California airports over the Pacific. He pulled up flight-aware data for that exact time and place. And guess what? A whole string of incoming airliners heading right towards the ship, flying over it from the ship's deck, looking towards them. They would have looked like stationary hovering lights, exactly what was reported.
Wow. And that just drives home the geometry point again, doesn't it? Like that case in Colorado in 2020 where a sheriff swore he saw a drone hovering low, like 500 feet. Turns out it was a 737 airliner miles away at 23,000 feet coming towards him. It really hammers it home. No amount of training beats geometry. You just can't reliably tell the distance of a light in the sky visually.
Exactly. And that's kind of where we have to leave it for the USS Kidd incident, based on the current public information, which I know can feel unsatisfying. What seems clear is that part of the incident, like the Russell sighting West investigated, has been pretty confidently identified as commercial air traffic. For the rest of the sightings, there just isn't enough detail in the logs or other data to say for sure. We can't say they were all just aircraft or other normal lights, but we also can't say the reports are inconsistent with that explanation either. The data's just too thin.
Yeah. Definitely unsatisfying if you were hoping for, smoking gun proof of some secret program or aliens or whatever. But based on the evidence we have access to, it seems like there's just insufficient evidence to really warrant digging much deeper right now. So what does this all mean for you listening? I think the USS Kidd story is a fascinating case study in just how complex observation can be, even seemingly simple observation. Next time you see something you can't explain, maybe think about all the layers, what your senses are telling you, what technology might be involved or not, even your own expectations or psychology. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other mysteries out there might have surprisingly mundane answers hiding just out of view?